Hello and welcome everyone to the Magna Europa mod for Hearts of Iron 4. This is a beautiful condensed map. It just focuses on Europe with New England and some other miniature countries here and there. Kind of funny. There are a lot of provinces in this mod. There are more provinces in this Europe mod than in the entire base game, and while it makes the game take a long time to load, it doesn't really impact anything in some substantial negative way. It's pretty cool, but kind of crazy. As someone who's made a map myself, I know just how much work has to go into making a mod with this many provinces. The map aside, let's now make things interesting. First, we aren't going to be playing today with the basic country borders. We're going to be playing with these borders. And second, we're not playing alone, but in a multiplayer game. Third, well, we're going to play as a great country, a really good one. Before dealing with other players here, our first objective is to unify the region we start in, this region here. While other players could potentially play these nations that surround us, most people in this session signed up in a way that there was only one person playing in their minor region, so conflicts would only arise after the initial unification. I say most, there were a few player versus player conflicts in these early stages. Additionally, too, wars were restricted until 1938. Since Hoi4 starts in 1936, this allows for a 2-year initial build-up until things can get really started. Then, the ability to declare wars in 1938 and beyond was restricted to this. This is what we call a flow chart. It greatly increases people's ability to follow Hoi4 multiplayer rules for the most part, though flowchart literacy is sometimes lacking. I guess that's okay. Either way, when unification got started, some interesting things happened. The most interesting thing that happened was Ireland invading Morocco, and Ireland is actually not Ireland, it's the Isle of Man, and it has a bizarre mission route where they go, I guess, to Morocco, and then they go to Rome, which is even better. Amazing country. Then in Russia, there were actually 2 players trying to unify the Russian region. There were 3 contenders in the Civil War, and the 2 players agreed to fight the AI Russia first, but one got backstabbed, and that kind of put them in a situation where they couldn't win. And 2, during this phase, I unfortunately ended up being the last to unify my region due to the Greek Navy. The Greek Navy contained a battleship, and my starting navy was nowhere near as powerful as theirs. This usually wouldn't be a problem, but they owned both Cyprus and Crete, and because of this, they had enough victory points on those islands that I would have to invade the islands to truly capitulate to them, and I needed to own Crete to do my formable nation and get cores on everything that surrounds Byzantium or Constantinople or Istanbul, as it's called at this time. Thus begins the hunt for the Greek Navy. I was alerted of this beforehand, so I knew that this would be a problem, but I did not know the extent of this problem, so I was at least smart, and I initially, instead of building lots of fighters and casks, put a majority of the proportion of military factories dedicated to air on naval bombers, decent naval bombers. Then, once the war with Greece started, I had to constantly switch my naval bombers between the Aegean and Levantine seas to attempt to bomb the Greek Navy as it moved between Crete and Cyprus, and sometimes on active missions outside of the port. This was incredibly difficult to find them, and intelligence agencies were practically disabled because of issues with the game crashing at later dates, so I couldn't use intel to figure out where the Navy was. I would use that if it was an option. I then too built a lot of dockyards and started building some good ships myself in a desperate attempt to get naval supremacy. This went on for a while, and what saved me was actually AI Italy declaring war on me. I was already ready for this. I knew that they would eventually declare, and it was a rather easy conflict since Austria-Hungary joined. I did almost get encircled once, but I broke the encirclement before they overran all of my divisions, so I kind of saved that, got a little lucky there. Then, once the war was over, I was able to take most of Italy and the Italian Navy, and I could use the Italian Navy in addition to my own navy and the naval bombers to finally invade Crete and unify my region, and no other major had declared war on me and ruined it before that, which was lucky. Upon doing this, I went from barely any manpower and 50 factories to almost 200 factories and 1 million manpower, so I was set to start building up a big army, and I had stockpiled a ton of supplies to build this up upon unifying. Then at this point, it was time for diplomacy. The winning Russia, aka the backstabbing one, offered up a potential alliance, and while I wasn't seeking to invade them, there also wasn't much reason to ally with them. They were taking a pretty neutral stance, and allying with them wouldn't really deter anybody on my borders, since it was more likely that I would be the one invading Austria-Hungary or the Umayyad Caliphate than one of them invading me, so I didn't really need a defensive alliance. A second option was Austria-Hungary. While I technically would get cores on part of their territory later and they maybe would be a target, they were more powerful than me for the time being, and they were kind of in a precarious situation and could better use an ally, and if I allied with them, it would prevent Germany from annexing them and becoming more powerful than me. So it kind of was useful for me for them to not die. And also, they offered Emperor Bob Jones a Habsburg wife, so it made it the obvious choice. Emperor Bob Jones is a very smart man, and he knows what a good offer is. Henceforth, from here, 3 factions formed: Democratic Germany and Scandinavia, who kept changing their faction name, Fascist France and Russia, who kept changing their faction name, and Imperial Austria-Hungary and Byzantium in the Habsburg alliance. The situation was tense, but the stalemate gave an opportunity for me to deal with AI countries like Kurdistan, Armenia, and Iran. The main issue was the fact that almost all these countries consisted entirely of mountain tiles, which are difficult to push into, but with some good division templates, a few really good mountaineers, I was able to eventually win. Getting all this territory was boosting my factory count by a ton because I had cores on all of it. And finally, after attacking those countries, I used my last war goal to declare on Jordan and the Iraq faction and finish them off. The Umayyad Caliphate had already been at war with these guys for a long time, and we split their territory in the end. Umayyad Caliphate also gets some of the best name placement in Hoi4 depending on what happens. Very good, amazing name placement. I really do love this. This is actually perfect. I wish all names were this 3-dimensional. Next though, things would change really fast because of the Poland crisis. Early on, Poland was kept as a neutral buffer state between Germany and Russia. However, we eventually had someone hot join as this Poland buffer state and trigger a Polish civil war. The player was on the fascist side and a natural ally to Russia. The AI was democratic and an ally to Germany. Eventually, after some interesting things happening, this led to a full conflict between the two sides, leaving the Habsburg alliance and the Caliphate as a neutral party. When the big player war finally started, from my perspective, not much was really happening initially. The Russian fighters actually turned out to be better than the German ones, despite the Germans having a lot more fighters. That's kind of a lie though, because Russia was just licensing my really good fighters, 1940 models ahead of time, and then later 1944 models in 1941. After unifying my region, I was mainly just focusing on great fighters and casts and no more naval bombers. I didn't really have too much competition in the Navy after all I had invested into it initially. Could have used some of the technologies though, maybe. We used this chaos of this player war though to begin invading AI Spain, which the Caliphate had already been at war with for a long time. They had a ton of divisions and we had to rely on some pretty serious naval invasions, but we were eventually able to split the peninsula. Following this, the conflict between Russia and Germany was close. Both sides had similar factory count. On one side there was a player on Scandinavia and 2 players co-oping Germany. On the other side there was a France player, a Russia player, and a Poland player. So it was 3 people versus 3 people. It was an interesting balance, but it wasn't really going anywhere anytime soon. And at this point I was the one with the most military factories with over 400, and Austria-Hungary, who was the faction leader, had 200. If we were to join a side at this point, they would instantly win, and if we declared war on both sides, it would severely disadvantage Germany more than Russia because of their border with Austria-Hungary, where a lot of my borders with Russia were a ton of mountain tiles and impassable terrain, so it wouldn't be that much of a threat to them. And I wasn't really certain if we could manage all the fronts and actually win, or if it would just become more of a stalemate. Instead, I just moved my 40 medium tank divisions around to random borders to power project. We sent attaches to both sides, and I think Austria-Hungary was war profiteering by selling guns to both sides. I also was licensing planes, but only to one side. If Germany was smart, they would have licensed my planes, but oh well. After Germany pushed a bit into France and made a landing, a truce was eventually agreed upon, and we ended things here. Anyways, that's it for today. I did play in another one of these sessions, and I might host another one later on my Discord server. We'll see. This entire thing is called MPRP5, the 5th one that we've hosted. It's kind of an annual thing, though it hasn't been going on for 5 full years yet. I think it's about 3 years or something, and the first 3 were all in 1 year. It's been hosted by Mr. Z-Man the entire time, so huge shout out, I guess, to him for making this whole thing possible. Anyways, I'll see you all next time.